When you think about where specialty coffee belongs, a bank probably isn't the first place that comes to mind. But what if the best coffee in your city happened to be served inside a Capital One branch? That's the audacious vision of Verve Coffee, the Santa Cruz-based coffee roaster that was started in 2007 and now has over a dozen cafe locations across California and Japan. Nash, the company's Senior Wholesale Manager, has spent the last 2 years helping Verve Coffee take over more than 50 Capital One cafe locations across 18 states. This includes places like Herald Square in New York and shopping malls in Kansas. Harris brings a unique perspective to this challenge. He's worked nearly every role in the industry, from barista to importer to getting stuck on a Chinese coffee farm during COVID lockdowns. But this Capital One project has pushed him out of his comfort zone even further, with training 600 baristas to represent Verve's brand in locations they don't directly control, creating systems to maintain quality across a massive geographic footprint, and proving that specialty coffee can thrive in unexpected places. Today, we'll explore how they're converting tourists ordering large iced macchiatos into specialty coffee drinkers, the infrastructure needed to maintain the Verve brand standards at scale, and how this partnership is allowing Verve to support more producers than ever before. Most importantly, we'll dig into Harris's evolving perspective on what specialty coffee can be and where it can go next. I'm Garrett Oden from Fresh Cup, and welcome to the Coffee Think Tank. The most innovative coffee businesses I know give themselves the space and energy to nurture a culture of innovation. Unfortunately, space and energy are things that most coffee business owners are short on. That's why I'm excited to introduce you to this season's sponsor, SumUp. SumUp is a point-of-sale company with a powerful suite of tools designed to help coffee businesses master the day-to-day and optimize customer retention so that you can have the flexibility and confidence to explore new opportunities. A full digital POS system, mobile card readers, loyalty and marketing automation, and even self-serve kiosks. Whether you're running a small cafe or a growing roastery, SumUp's tools give you the breathing room to explore innovation in your business. Visit SumUp.com to learn more. Hey, Harris, welcome to the Coffee Think Tank podcast.
Hey, Garrett, thanks so much for having me. Stoked to be here. Been, almost a year and a half since we initially started talking about this.
It's been a while.
Finally be on.
Yeah, so we met at Expo in 2024, and I walked up to the booth. You really wanted to tell me about the Dwell Dripper, which is a really cool brewer. Don't get me wrong, but I was like, yeah, but tell me about Capital One cafes. I want to hear about this other thing. And you were like, oh, well, that's actually, yeah, I've been working on that. And I was like, perfect. We need to get together. And there were a lot of people hanging out around the booth. So, we didn't get into it then, but 14 months later, we made it.
Totally. Yeah. And I'm glad that you did lean into that. I mean, I'll mention the Dwell Dripper today, but this project has been quite a ride. And, but I think I get passionate after being in specialty coffee for a while talking about this because, the initial thought of people is like, oh, interesting, like Verve in a bank. And I could talk all day long about how it matters, how it's important, how it actually is pushing specialty coffee forward, all that we'll get into. So when you asked to talk about it, I'm like, please, let's dive in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
I want to start with you. You have a really interesting history, and how you ended up here is not a straightforward path. So I'd love to hear, how do you end up being one of the point people in this Capital One Cafe takeover project?
Yeah. I'll try to keep it short, running back like a lot of us do. Had one cup of coffee that rocked my world. Went from drinking Folgers in Alabama to an Ethiopian natural on Kalita at a shop in Chicago, Cafe Streets. And like at that moment was like, I got to do something about this. Became a barista while I was in college, and then dropped out of college to actually the owner of Absinto Coffee, Tim Taylor, was like, I was a barista for him, and he said, you need to drop out of college. Coffee, this could be your future. And I was like, that sounds wild, but gave it a shot. He taught me management, cupping, roasting, and ran his shops for a few years. He got me into Cup of Excellence, just really enjoying cupping and being a part of that program. So fortunately, I had the chance to go judge Cup of Excellence in 4 or 5 countries, and then made the move over to Metric Coffee, jumped into the wholesale game at that point. For me, wholesale, so much fun because it's like new context every day for how to make specialty coffee in a restaurant, in a bookstore, in a hotel, like in different contexts, and did that for a few years for Metric. And at that point was like, I want to be more involved on the farm level and feel like I talk about it so much, but I haven't spent more than 2 weeks at an origin. So I was like, hey, Metric, I'm going to quit and go live on a coffee farm. Had a few ideas, but ultimately, crazy turn of events, ended up in China on a farm on the border of Myanmar and Yunnan province, just wanting to learn about processing. And of course, got there January of 2020, no idea what COVID was, ended up getting stuck, but worked through a whole harvest, ended up at a SCI training center in China, got my Q while I was locked there, came back to San Francisco, jumped in with St. Frank Coffee, and then started an importing company with Kevin Bolin and Ben Hameen Paz from Honduras, and then ran that for a few years and was selling green coffee to Verve, and that'll bring me to where we're at now. And Verve ultimately had this position open up where they wanted someone to come help with this Capital One Cafe project. And I think given I've kind of done quite a bit within different realms of the industry, it made sense. But then as far as wholesale and having a heart for pushing specialty coffee, that's ultimately where I jumped on.
Okay, so what roles in the industry have you not had? Because it seems like you've done just about everything.
I haven't been a production roaster. I have done production roast. I haven't been a production roaster. And I guess, there's little jobs here and there, but mostly have just enjoyed getting to dive into each step.
Wow, incredible. I want to ask you so much about working on a coffee farm in China. That's like, I talk to people who've worked on coffee farms, but in China, in the middle of COVID, I'm sure that's kind of wild. So we're going to save that for later, but we're going to come back to it. Verve brings you on. How does something like the Capital One Cafe project, come at, onto a desk at Verve in the first place?
Yeah. Wild turns of the story, but Capital One Cafe has been around about a decade or almost 12 years now. They initially partnered with Peet's, which I think, makes sense. They're like launching this cafe model. They find a pretty approachable, known company. But in 2021, 22, Capital One, I knew nothing about banking and back end of banking, but their whole mission is making banking approachable and innovating. And so they were like, we're doing that, but we're not doing that with our coffee. We need to find a new coffee partner who's kind of on the front end. And so they started reaching out to folks. Verve was one on the list. And through a few conversations, kind of talking through mission, values, vision, they ended up picking us. Yeah.
Wow. So I think that, before you had been Peet's, I've seen Peet's in other grocery stores, had cafes attached and things like that. And it's always interesting whenever a place like that switches their partner for coffee.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, like, how does this happen? Because even growing up, Peet's in the grocery store, there were always people there. And so does this project, is this initiated before you get at Verve, or are you there in that process of trying to do discovery and evaluate the opportunity?
So they had done, maybe 6 months of discovery and evaluation before they brought me on. And right before the launch, they brought me on to, tackle training initially, but account management, like how to launch this. So we had, people, obviously CEO Colby was very involved, but then had a couple people in our team involved, but we needed someone to like go out and like, how do we launch this out in the field? At the time there were about 50 cafes. So they brought me on right before launch.
What was that like for you? Were you stepping into your wheelhouse and you felt really comfortable? Was this like hugely risky and, you're staking your reputation on something that was going to be really difficult?
To be honest, when I made the transition to Verve, people were like, awesome, what are you doing there? When I shared about it, quite a few people were like, oh, really? Like, what? There's got to be more to the story. There's no way you'd go do this bank cafe thing. And also, why is Verve doing that? But again, if you give me 2 minutes, if you give me 30 seconds, I can give you the pitch of why it matters. So I wouldn't say it's in my wheelhouse. I've done quite a bit of wholesale, but never at this scale. I've worked with I've done wholesale for folks who have 4 locations, maybe 5 locations, but 50. Not to add, not mentioning the complexity of it being in a bank, of it being in, I guess, 18, 19 different states, um, and then working, with an operator. There's just, I could go on and on about the complexities of this project. So definitely not within my wheelhouse. Off the bat, I just needed to focus on like wherever I am, I'm going to be present because what I know is coffee and passion and getting people excited about it and training. So it's hard to get to all locations, but every time I was at a location, it's like I'm going to pour in deep while I'm here, while we were kind of developing systems on the back end.
So I want to make sure I kind of understand the foundation of the structure of this. So Capital One Cafe is an existing, it's an existing space, it's an existing sort of brand, and there's an existing operator of those locations. And they wanted it to be Verve, like Verve branded, Verve products, but it's not necessarily a Verve cafe in the same way that the other, you know, Verve cafes are. So can you tell me like are these contracted store? I don't what's the language here?
Yeah, good question. Just to be careful of what I share. Essentially, you could say it's a proudly serving Verve. It's Capital One Cafes featuring Verve Coffee. But let's say you're working with a restaurant down the road. They have their restaurant, their name, their brand, all of that, and then they serve Verve Coffee. But with these banks, you're not like, they don't have any existing type of food and beverage branding, marketing. So it's Capital One Cafes, but then they needed, someone to fully house it. So it's like, well, we're going to partner with Verve. We'll use Verve signage, Verve drinks, Verve merch, Verve retail. Like you go in the cafe, for all intents and purposes, it looks like a Verve from a brand standpoint. Obviously, it's a little different based on their design. But yeah, so it's Capital One Cafe is the house. There's an operator who runs these things behind the scenes, and then Verve is the brand. And so a lot of our job is maintaining our brand in these places and helping support the operator to support our brand. Because it's not just coffee, it's hospitality, it's customer service, even food, drinks, snacks, whatever they serve, we're involved with, even if it's not what we have in our current cafe. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So these locations, they come in with sort of built-in foot traffic, but the customer base is different than Verve and classic Verve. I'm sure. So do you have to adapt the brand and the products and the process, or what's that look like?
Yeah. Goodness. I think one thing we had like a little mindset shift when we started this project of not seeing these as different customers than Verve, but more of untapped or new customers that we could convert to Verve and even more than Verve, specialty coffee. That being said, 2 challenges. One, you're going from Peet's to Verve. They have, since we came on, they've opened 10, 15 new locations that started as Verve, but most of it was taking over the old locations that literally, it's Peet's, they shut down for a week or 2, then you open up and it's Verve. So a massive challenge with converting customers from Peet's to Verve. And to answer that question or around that, I would say one of the biggest things was training these baristas really well. We had a full training module on redirects of someone orders a large iced macchiato. How do you get them from that to a specialty macchiato without shutting them down? Like a massive part of my heart is hospitality, because the more we can bring people into this experience, not just at Capital One's, but in specialty coffee, the more we bring them into supporting producers and knowing where coffee comes from and the whole discovery. So yeah, whole training on, instead of, no, we don't do caramel macchiatos, we're specialty, teaching them to say, yeah, so what we do is a traditional macchiato. And every time they pick up that small cup, they hold it in front of the customer's face, be like, is this what you're looking for? And if they say no, we're like, no worries. We can make you a latte, an iced latte. Let's talk about some house-made syrups we have, kind of converting them over and then getting them in the door, because the first chance from Peet's to Verve is your chance to reconvert a customer. Or if someone walks in off the street, they're like, oh, what's Verve? And then they go up and the barista is rude or doesn't share with them what the heart is behind the coffee, essentially you're like, now they have that taste of Verve and also specialty coffee. So it's a challenge. And then the second challenge I should mention is the areas in which Capital One cafes are located aren't the areas that we would typically go after at Verve. We're talking a lot of
Mm-hmm.
financial districts. I mean, New York, major market, Herald Square, Union Square, Soho, and then Boston, downtown, just these highly trafficked, almost a lot more touristy areas, how to convert those customers or how to bring them into specialty coffee. And they also have quite a few locations in malls, which again, we're not, when you think about Verve, we're not like, hey, where should we open next? Let's go into a mall. But that being said, Capital One has such a presence there. Think about someone walking past a Capital One cafe in a mall, popping in, seeing an Ethiopian natural pour over on the menu, and being able to get that in Ohio and Texas and Kansas, like these places where we wouldn't normally be.
You mentioned this is like a really critical moment. Somebody comes in, they've ordered Peet's coffee at this location. Things are different now. They really have to have a good experience to feel like this is still the place that they want to be. I see the challenge for that, making sure you're providing that experience for the consumer. What about for the staff? Was this difficult for them to sort of you get to understand how to communicate the differences and
Yeah.
do those redirects, or did it come sort of naturally?
For some folks, it came naturally. Either folks who were already into specialty coffee and were like, how cool, now I get to work with Verve. But then I would say majority of the staff wasn't super familiar with specialty. And some folks very resistant to it. If you go from a Peet's dark or even medium to a Verve medium, they'll taste it and, oh, wow, this is super sour, super, whatever the language that they'll use for like, this isn't what I'm used to. So trying to bring them into the why behind it is so important. Because if you just come in and say, we're not Peet's, we're Verve, here's lighter roast coffee, serve it and get behind it, they're going to, ultimately leave. So every training we start out with a seed to cup class, a tasting class of like, hey, so if you don't know, here's where coffee comes from, here's how it grows. Once we get through that, then I'm like, all right, now we're literally in that moment going to taste a natural, a honey, a wash, and anaerobic side by side, then taste a light, medium, dark in the specialty realm, and kind of essentially just educating them for them to feel empowered to bring it to customers. You can't convert every barista, but at the very least, we're saying, hey, can you get on board with describing this coffee objectively? Because that's a big part of our training is like, they're like, well, I don't like this coffee. It's like, well, let's talk about, how to share about this coffee, even if it's not your preference, or helping them find what they do like on the menu. And then they end up converting customers into those type of drinks. So definitely resistance, but also you see some really cool buy-in in the process of folks who have never done specialty are now doing it in these cafes. And then, quite a few people who even walk from these cafes, move on to other jobs within specialty.
Huh. So the training process, my understanding is that you had to go and source experts in the different markets where you were opening Verve locations to help facilitate all the training and work through that process. Can you tell me about that?
We have our locations in California, and we've got some stellar trainers. And as much as we had capacity, we got our people to each of these markets. But, probably 4 or 5 of us were the only ones that were available to go spend a week in New York or Austin or Seattle to open up a cafe, give a full training. And so we had to recruit some help. But I think one thing about this project is, and I'll mention this later, how much more we were able to bring in specialty coffee more than just Verve getting pushed forward. So in regards to training, we would find local trainers in each market or local coffee people to help us train, and we'd contract them to come be a part of the training process. So they could bring in their expertise of the market, but also specialty. So, when I fly into Philly or fly into Austin, find a local trainer there just through our network, or a local coffee person, and then hire them on, teach them our brands, and then they'd come into the cafe and I would teach Verve, teach quality, teach our recipes, and they would bring in some expertise here and there of, and in Austin, here's what it looks like to do this, or in this neighborhood type of thing.
That's interesting. Have you retained them? Are they still sort of your boots on the ground?
So they were all contracted. Just like coffee people, we asked, hey, can you take 3-4 days off of work? Obviously good pay, but a cool opportunity to be a part of this project. I mean, we have a good relationship with everybody we've worked with. One of them we've brought fully on staff since then.
Hmm,
But yeah, it was mainly
cool.
contracting for a shorter period.
What other kind of infrastructure did you have to set up to pull this off? Are there new team members or, different systems on the back end?
Yeah. So um, as far as back end goes, definitely production had to shift. Uh, Packaging, just kind of, I think we already had great infrastructure in place, but it definitely caused us to relook at our infrastructure given, you know, within a week or two, you've got 50 new locations and some of them very high volume, some of them not quite as high volume, but they're all shipping out to different locations around the country. So production, packaging, our whole roasting team, there's a little bit of a shift there, as well as we took it as an opportunity to house more products for these cafes. So cleaning products, Cafes, Arenza, brushes, anything you kind of need on bar. Teas, we partnered with Rishi, had a certain line for them, matcha, chai, all of that, so that essentially we could help Capital One get all that um, through us, and also continue to I don't want to say enforce, continue to encourage specialty, not just in the coffee, because these are full on cafes. They have food, they have other beverages, they have things on the menu, but it says Verve on the menu. So people think it's a Verve. And so we have a say really or part of the conversation for everything that happens on the menu.
So you have new people, or you've got you sort of managing this. You've got people who are sort of extending their roles to so this is now part of it with roasting and the supply chain and whatnot. And you've got these trainers that you've worked with in some of the different cities you're now in. Who else?
I could probably name 20 people within the company that have had a hand in it, because as coffee gets passed through roasting or even green buying, I was talking to our green buyer yesterday and mentioning this podcast and how we had to source more coffee after taking on this account. And I would be more to not share this part. And one thing that I would say during the middle of the thick of the project, I'd been in, gosh, probably 40 cafes and 3-4 months on the road most of half of the year. And our green buyer reached out and was like, just want to let you know the impact this project's making. We needed more coffee for the project. I was able to go to Benjamin Paz in Honduras and say, which producers do you have that are still don't have buyers or need buyers? Because we actually have a lot of capacity right now. Do you have folks we can work with? And he was like, actually, here's 6-7 producers, full production of their coffee. We had a price. We worked with Capital One. I should shout out that they have been incredible in the process of not saying you need to go lower, 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 of them saying, we want to work with you for who Verve is and your mission, supporting producers. So we will pay what it takes. Obviously, there's discussion about what it takes to pay producers, but we know, being in direct relationship with farmers in Honduras, we know what they need to make. So Benjamin said, here's the price for these 7 producers. And we said, great, we'll take it all. So we were able to buy lots of production of 7 or 8 producers that probably wouldn't have had buyers or would have struggled to find buyers straight into this project. And so all that to say, so many people have been involved in this project. And I think it's been cool is that the biggest thing is holding to Verve's mission and values throughout this entire project. And that's not just quality in the cafes. It goes all the way to the very far side of green buying and who we're working with and how we're working with them.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. What does it take to make sure that that stays true? You have cafes in places where you're not physically. Yeah, how do you maintain that brand? How do you maintain the buy-in for the baristas there?
Yeah, I would say that is probably the biggest challenge of this entire project is our brand being represented and us maintaining high standards. I would say, Verve is a lot more than this, but the 3 categories that I would say are kind of foundational to us are working directly with coffee farmers, paying them equitably more directly. Second, high quality. That's not just coffee, but beverages we serve. And third is hospitality. so crucial to specialty and to our heart. And so within those three realms, Verve has created this kind of silly infrastructure called SPA. It's service, product, atmosphere. And all of our cafe managers they walk into their cafe, and do a spa. And there's 15, 20, 30 questions about each of those areas. And at the end of it, they can sit down with their managers, their team, walk through, here's things we need to work on. So we adapted that into the Capital One cafes, created a new spa. It's a little stricter than that. It's technically an audit. But we want to call it a spa versus walking in being like, you're being audited right now. We don't want it to feel like a health inspection, but essentially it's like you could take our brand standards, a 20-page legal document, and the spa or the audit fully reflects those 20 pages within questions. Customer service, were you greeted when you walked in? How long did it take? Are you, eye contact when they pass your drink? Did they call your name out? Are they familiar with the brand? Did they redirect you if you ordered the wrong, a full list of each of those things. Quality is obviously a massive part of that. Refracting every batch brew, refracting their pour overs, checking their espresso recipes. Obviously taste is important. And then atmosphere, what it feels like in there. Whole bean is out within a reasonable date. So all that to say, kind of back to your question, how have we gone about that challenge? I think one big thing is creating a system for which we can evaluate cafes, but also now the managers have this structure. And if at any point, and probably weekly, monthly, they should go through this and make sure they are following our standards and they can do it themselves. But on top of that, I've done training for multiple companies, but never to this depth where, at the moment there's almost 600 baristas in the field through these cafes representing Verve Coffee. You can't just put together, here's the recipe for batch brew. Here's the recipe for batch brew. Here's how to calibrate your batch brewer. And not just, a document. There's a video, an SOP, a recipe card, even going deeper, how to handle hot water, like things that you wouldn't really think to train on because it's kind of a part of specialty. Given such a big infrastructure of Capital One cafes, we've had to go as granular as you could ever imagine for every step of the process. I created an SOP for hot water. How hot should it be? Preheating kettles, what should you serve pour overs at, and how do you get to that place? So training has been massive. And then honestly, it has shifted us to using LMS. I don't know if you're familiar, like learning management systems online. Something I've seen some companies start to develop, but I think is probably on the way in specialty for these bigger companies is you don't just want to send out a document. Here's how you make this coffee. How do you be more involved, more interactive? Definitely videos, but also just nice to read curriculum that also has quizzes and checklists, and it's a lot more interactive. So the operators of these cafes already use that. So we took our training modules, hospitality, milk, espresso, brewing, and then worked with them to implement it into their LMS system to make sure employees are going through that and being trained well. But to be honest, that is the challenge to this day. And I think, for the full partnership, as long as it goes, this will be the challenge, continuing to grow in that. And then lastly, I'll mention, we have me as a trainer. We have our other Verve trainers that help here and there, but ultimately we have to help these cafes be more self-sufficient in training themselves. And so the operators hired on coffee trainers per region that will be trained and have been trained through Verve, a week or two at our headquarters in Santa Cruz in LA, going through full Verve training, going through trainers training, and then going back out into the field and meeting with me regularly because I can only be so many places at once. So they are now helping train and implement our brand in these stores. So it's kind of like figuring out how to empower people to manage and train within our brand.
There's so many companies that would be too risk averse to entertain onboarding hundreds of new employees that they don't control and that aren't directly their employees. So that's really interesting. It sounds like you've counteracted that by being very precise and granular in how you create that learning documentation. Is there anything else that you've done that's like, this is like risk mitigation? This is how we, make this, make this run smooth for everybody in that regard?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think one note is Colby, as CEO and founder of Verve, just incredibly innovative and pushing the boundaries. And I remember earlier on in the project, he approached me after a trip to New York. I opened up a new store there and, spent 12 days getting a full cafe set up in the middle of Herald Square, across from the biggest Macy's. Like I'm talking probably 50,000 people walk in front of the door of the store every single day, kind of like,
Wow.
kind of busyness. I got back from there and, it's just a lot. I trained 18 baristas, most of whom had never touched coffee, got them fully dialing in espresso, pour overs, pouring latte art in a 2-week span. And he just said, hey, appreciate you on this project, but I want you to know, like, the vision I see is that how wild if you walk into a bank in New York or Boston and it could be competing with some of the best specialty or the best specialty in that city. Like, it's such a way no one would ever think. Like, why would specialty be in a bank? But he's like, we had that opportunity and that chance. And, ultimately he saw the vision of being able to push specialty forward through this project. So I wanted to note that as far as, you mentioned being risk averse. He definitely is like, hey, I see the vision. Let's figure out how to make this happen. We're going to go after this. And, there's just been a lot behind the scenes. This morning, yesterday, like every single day for the last 2 years, there's new things that we are continuing to develop as new things come up, to try to make sure the brand is represented. Our brand is represented well. One thing I should definitely mention is that Capital One is a partner, and someone who's collaborating with us. They have been incredibly supportive in knowing who we are and continuing along the way to make sure the brand is being represented, and then the operating partner also being on board with that. And so it takes collaboration. It takes trust of them to say, when we send out this SOP, when we say batch brew needs to be brewed this way, this temperature, brewers calibrated, techs out for PMs, everything that we say, them trusting that they're getting it done and they're reporting back with it. But ultimately we need to have a relationship. It's not like dropping the hammer on them, more of how can we work together? Because ultimately we're all going after the same vision here, of like starting to scale specialty coffee,
How do you integrate Verve's look and feel into the cafes? I know there's the big sign, it says Verve. You walk in, it's your menu. There's like signage around the coffee equipment and the espresso machine. There's all these little things, but like, who owns the tables and chairs or the light fixtures? Or, how detailed do you go before, where's the cutoff between this is a Capital One Cafe thing and this is a Verve thing?
Totally. If you walk into our store on Pacific Avenue in Santa Cruz, and then you walk into the one that I just opened in Soho in New York, the Capital One Cafe, they're going to feel a bit different for sure. But I think it was, instead of trying to like copy paste a Verve into that space, it was like, how do we represent Verve well within Capital One Cafe structure? And thankfully they have really brought us into the process. Next week we're having a meeting about, future cafe innovation and build out. And that does come down to the tables and chairs. And we are a part of those conversations. Not that we have a lot to say, but essentially them bringing us in and us being able, there's times where we've pushed back, but most of the time it's like, oh, that makes sense. How can we adapt to that space as far as tables and chairs go? But then behind the bar, they sought us out about equipment to use. They're using our pour overs, they're using our dwell drippers now. So there's a look of Verve back there. The menu we developed, it's not the exact copy paste Verve menu, but we developed every single coffee drink on there and continue to. Our marketing team helps with their menu design. So like they have their own team that designs it, but our marketing team is in on every one of those meetings. They're collaborating to create the menu, the look of the menu. They've given room for signage of, roaster of the year for last year. We got roaster of the year. So that sign was up there. There's a picture of some producers that we partner with. So there's a little bit of that. And then ultimately, I think retail, our cold coffee flash brew cans are out there, our instant coffee, some merch. We're still figuring out how to integrate it well though. But when you walk in, there's no no doubting that it's a Verve. And you can, even if it doesn't look exactly like a Verve, you feel it. There's been people from New York that have reached out that used to live in California that say, this is cool. Like I can feel the
Huh.
Verve within this. The heart of it is there.
Yeah. Okay, you mentioned marketing. I'm curious about this because when you go into a grocery store or somewhere else, they expect you to pull your weight and do your own marketing to make sure that sales are happening in the store. Is this like that, or do they handle marketing? How does that work?
Yeah. So it hasn't been, we do work with grocery and it hasn't been like that where they've been very, very gracious and essentially like, instead of like a client type of relationship, it's more of a, we're working together, we're collaborating. We both want the same thing here. Essentially, like the more people they get in the door, that is great for their marketing, and for their mission as the bank to get people in and obviously convert them at some point. But they are helping drive people in the door through promotions. And I mean, even right now, MLB Mondays is a promotion they do. And if you sign up, I think there's a QR code, it's any free drink on the menu, any drink. So lines
Mm.
out the doors every Monday on one of the slower days in the cafe. They're not pushing the marketing on us. We do obviously want to market it. And we recently posted a video and did an official launch of like, here's our partnership. We had mentioned it here and there, but it was kind of the official launch. But it's a collaboration for sure. They're bringing a lot of people in the door, but ultimately, I would say our training and the baristas serving drinks well is what's going to be the biggest marketing for Verve and for specialty, because if they get them in the door and they come up to order, and a lot of times they'll give out a free drink card for people that walk in,
Mm.
we have that chance at that moment to say, here's Verve coffee, here's specialty coffee, taste it. Even if it's an iced latte, it's good quality espresso, good milk. We're working with Pink House Alchemy out of Arkansas to do all the syrups, very high quality, no additives. Like we have that chance for them to convert that customer and say, oh, this actually is really good. So hope that answers your
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about tools and tech that you use to manage all this? Anything you couldn't live without?
Um, Man, I mean, LMS has been huge. We just send over all of our modules and then they'll send us over
Gotcha.
at the end to,
Gotcha.
to create it. Yeah. So that's been huge as far as training goes. I don't want to open this can of worms too much. Most of the locations, over half of them have Eversys espresso machines. At our stores, we're only manual espresso machines. We mainly use keys, Vanderwest and Spirits. That was a massive learning curve. But if you talk about tech, you have to mention Eversys. Yeah, definitely an adjustment for us, but they sent us a machine before the project launched. We tested it for weeks and weeks and weeks in our lab, pulling shots on the keys right next to the Eversys, mimicking the shots, figuring out the recipe that would best mimic it. And what's neat about that is, as much as I would want manual machines in every store, with the mass of baristas, 600, and with a lot of them not having coffee experience, the Eversys does create an environment where they can pull a good shot of espresso. They're still steaming their milk. We're still teaching latte art. They're still doing pour overs. They're still dialing in coffees, but it takes a little bit of that challenge out of fully dialing in and keeping coffee dialed in. Yeah, I mean, I would say those are kind of the main systems. A lot of systems we currently had in place for Verve, we just had to expand on and deepen. We work in the G Suite and just fully have integrated that in and tracking a lot of our back-end QuickBooks projections. It's caused us to have to tighten up for sure when you
Yeah.
bring on a partner this big.
Any sort of metrics or frameworks you're using to define success in these spaces beyond our traders say this is good? Spa is a good example.
Yeah, that's a great question. So given there's Capital One, the operator, and Verve, each of us have our own KPIs or metrics for success. And we meet, we have lots and lots of meetings, but we have one specific meeting, monthly business review, which is going over numbers for that month. Each of the three teams present, and then we all have metrics that we're using. So Verve, it's our audits, our spas. For Capital One, they've got their NPS, their Net Promoter Score. They also have reviews. And I mean, what's neat about working with a company this big, they have so much in place as far as marketing, reviews, systems in which, getting KPIs that Verve didn't have before this. And we're able to kind of piggyback on that. So they come to us and
Huh.
say, here's all the data that we have. How do y'all want to use it? And, for us, we use our audits. We also use reviews that go in through them, reviews that come into us because people see it as a Verve. So a lot of reviews come straight to us about your coffee in Herald Square, not your coffee in the Capital One Cafe. And then the operator has their own metrics for success. They're big on Nudge. It's a learning and like checklist platform. And so, I mean, one thing that it's been cool to partner with the operator in this way, that they are completely dialed in on their systems, where every morning they have to check temperatures of everything, cleanliness of everything, sanitizer buckets, anything that would have anything to do with health inspection, food inspection is marked to the moment. And if it's not within an hour or two after they open, they will get notified. Managers will get notified. So they have that locked in. So a big part of us is like trusting them with that side of things, and then bringing in the coffee infrastructure and training and continued development there.
Okay, tell me about this new product you've launched for Capital One cafes. Um, where did it come from? What was the process of doing that, and what's the rollout been like?
Yeah, great question. It's pretty exciting. It launched last week. So we launched a coffee blend for Capital One cafes. It's called Daybreaker Blend. Over a year in the works. Capital One, once we launched, brought to us like most partners do. We love a coffee that's like ours. And I think what was so neat about the way they approached us is we want to make sure it falls within Verve's mission of supporting coffee farmers. And actually, could we go even a step further and like have a give back component to this coffee? So we started the marketing, we started naming it, we started working through what would it look like to find producers that Capital One could support, because with 60 locations, you do have impact there. And so ultimately, we found two foundations to work with. One is called the Farm Level Foundation. I'm actually through Verve. It's some folks at Verve that started a fully separate 501c3 that is working directly with farmers, giving back in different ways. And then we also work with REI. They have REI Foundation. They're a big partner of Capital One. And so the big give back's getting split between those two. All that to say, this blend, we slowly created a two coffee blend, Colombia and Ethiopia. From Colombia, and we're working with folks at Monte Benito, just incredible partners that we've worked with for a long time. They have a need right now for parabolic dryers. So we're like, let's use that coffee, get it into the blend, and then part of the give back through Farm Level Foundation will be in the next year, we'll be able to get parabolic dryers for everyone in that community. And then the second is a co-op we work with in Ethiopia and Guji Highlands. And that's the other part of the blend. What's neat is like, again, they're moving from Peet's to Verve. So we start creating this blend. Obviously, we're going to go the Verve way, light to medium roast. But how do we reach customers where they're at without sacrificing who we are? And so we're not going to, char the heck out of a coffee. We're going to roast it thoughtfully based on terroir, origin, all the things we're looking for. And so we created this blend, different ratios of that blend, 5 different roast profiles of that blend that all fell within our range, and took it to the Capital One team. And in New York, big conference room, cupped these coffees blind and started working on iterations. So we took it from 5 to 3, and then from 3 down to 2, and then messed with the ratios and roast profile, and eventually came up with this profile for roasting and this blend. And it's incredible. It's got the Ethiopia's natural processed, which is fun because it adds a little bit of fruit. It's definitely more of a medium development on the roast. So you get a lot of those depth of chocolate and some of those classic flavors, but you also get this nice punch of sweetness from that Ethiopian coffee. So we launched the Daybreaker blend last week in cafes. It's the exclusive coffee for Capital One. You can only buy it there, and is on drip at all times and on retail shelf as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, so drip and retail shelf, not for espresso.
Not for espresso at the moment, at least. We also have it on instant coffee too.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, a version of it.
Using Swift for the instant coffee.
Yep. At the moment we are. Yeah. Trying
Cool.
to again, Verve is big on innovation. And so we've been just messing around and testing how can we keep pushing instant coffee, because it's gotten so much better. I mean, I love our instant coffee. I have it every flight I'm on to every Capital One cafe. I use our coffee, but then
Yeah.
we're trying to continue to push the boundaries. So we're cupping instants and different iterations and throughout almost every week.
Yeah. I just talked to Bailey Manson from Intelligency about their instant espresso experiment, and it's super
Yeah.
fascinating. So yeah, you should check that out if you haven't listened to
Yeah.
that yet.
I heard that podcast. It's incredible.
Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah. I love some good instant. Okay, so I imagine this has to have sort of changed your perspective on where specialty coffee can fit, and how specialty as a business can thrive. I'd love to
Mm,
hear what this has been like for you.
yeah. Gosh, such a good question. I think just like a lot of our journeys within coffee, you start with a coffee that wows you, but once you're starting to get into coffee, you start with maybe a medium, then you kind of ease into light, and then start with milk, and then a little less milk, and then end up with espresso. Like, and then at a certain point, you go all the way out into this intense. I'm drinking all naturals and anaerobics and the craziest, funkiest. But I feel like there's always a swing for people of like, there's a place for those coffees, but don't forget about blends. Don't forget about medium roasts. And so I'm speaking about that to say this idea of what specialty coffee can be. I think kind of the next wave of coffee will be making specialty coffee more approachable. Doesn't mean doing away with the crazy tech we're seeing and the co-ferments and processes and all the funk. I think that has a place, but I think we're also seeing like, that's a teeny percentage of even specialty are those coffees. So then what is specialty coffee as a whole? And then how can we bring this and push this forward, because it's still a minimal amount of full coffee production for the world is specialty. So to answer your question, it's opened my eyes of what specialty coffee can be, of where you can serve specialty coffee, the clientele or the people who you would never think would drink specialty being converted to specialty. I was in two examples just in my traveling to all 60 cafes in the last 2 years. One example, I was in Herald Square. These tourists rolled in off the street, older folks. You're like, okay, they're probably going to order a big Americano and dump a bunch of whatever in it. Ended up ordering a pour over and watched them drink, and actually approached them and say, hey, I'd love to hear your feedback. I'm with the coffee company. And they're like, oh, this is amazing. We don't normally drink coffee like this, but it was a Honduran coffee, and they were just like, just tastes super chocolatey and sweet. And seeing that conversion, they would have never, you never think that would work. And then another example is, gosh, I mean, so many malls I've been in. I think this one was in outside of Kansas or maybe outside of St. Louis, 30 minutes, like no specialty coffee to be found anywhere on the map. And then you go into this mall and just seeing folks who just shopped at, I don't know, Zara, or have a pretzel in their hand and then walk in and order a shot of espresso or a traditional macchiato. And then they're like, oh, I normally drink big macchiatos, but I tried the smaller one and it's actually really good. And so I have a massive heart for, back to the beginning part of my answer, what specialty coffee can be. And if we're stuck in a mindset of it can only be the trendiest, most innovative, or like pushing the boundaries as far as we can, I think we're losing out on a ton of customers. So if we're able to do medium roast well, if we're able to bring coffee through a bank to Herald Square, serving pour overs and serving good drip coffee, it's almost like, wow, what can't we do within specialty? Like I mentioned earlier, because of this project, we've been able to support many more producers, import more containers of coffee just from this project alone. And that's specialty coffee that wouldn't have been bought without this project. And so I want roasters to keep doing their thing and keep innovating. And I'm drinking a natural process from Panama right now, but also like knowing there's a place, even if it's not your preference, for a medium roast on drip coffee in an area or a mall or somewhere you wouldn't expect. Specialty coffee has a long way to go. And I think anyone who's honest in specialty knows that, and hopefully we can figure out ways to reach more people. And this project's shown me we absolutely can.
I like that, and I appreciate that perspective. It seems like I encounter sometimes, and I've thought myself that so specialty coffee, we're so saturated. We exist in so many of the places that we could be. Where do you go next? And and I travel around and I step outside of my regular routines, and I'm like, there's like these wonderful coffee bars that are like, in a shack at the beach, or like in all these in malls, and there's so many spaces where coffee can still exist in a different format, and especially can probably make a way there. There's still so much potential, and this is, I think, proof of that.
Oh, yeah, that's a massive part of my heart. I'm figuring out how to get specialty in those places and almost like reshifting thinking of not lowering standards, keeping standards for high quality coffee, but also within the 84 to 86 realm, like point scoring in coffee, you can find a medium roast. You can serve that at a place you'd never expect. I mean, that's kind of what the wholesale world is showing us within specialty of like, yeah, I was at a bakery last week, and then I was, we have coffee in Slack headquarters, and we have our shops in Japan. I mean, like there's just, I like that perspective, and hopefully all of folks in the industry can be like, oh, wow, it's not as saturated as we think. Maybe within like a certain realm of multi-roaster cafe in each city, there's only so much space, but like, let's think a little bit broader and see how specialty coffee can grow in that way.
I love that. Yeah. Let's bring more good coffee to the burbs. That's all I'm saying. Let's surrender this to
Yeah,
the burbs.
I hear that.
Okay. So what's next for the partnership?
Great question. Launching this blend was huge. Just to, continuing to give back and to push our coffee doing good with this partnership. We launched the Dwell Dripper, which is, to plug it, it's Verve's pour over method. It's a flat bottom, completely open bottom brewer, really fast, 2.5-minute brews. We launched that at the cafes 2 weeks ago as well, which is huge. For the future, I would say, honestly, it's what I've talked about, but continuing it, continuing to deepen training. One thing we said last year, one of the many, many goals we had was latte art on every drink, no excuse, on every single drink that goes out. Not that latte art is necessarily a show that it's a good cup of coffee, but if you're doing latte art, you're being thoughtful about how you're steaming. And if they're working with these Eversys machines, it should be, unless it's broken, pulling pretty close to in spec. But I think that latte art shows customers, okay, they care about this. It's similar to plating food in a restaurant. If you get a well plated plate of food, it's like, oh, there was care and thought behind this. So we've launched and are launching in the next few months a fully new realm of the training program within Capital One. We call it Train the Trainer program, where their trainers come to us and then we meet with them regularly as they go back out. We redeveloped the training manual. Like I said, Nudge and LMS. We've gone deeper in our training there. And then also specialty drinks. I didn't mention this, but we create for all 4 seasons a specialty menu of drinks for 3 to 4 more fun, more approachable drinks. We don't sacrifice our quality. We don't, pump it full of artificial flavors. But like tomorrow, we're launching a new menu there, and it's got there's a s'more shakerato, and it's like, oh, that's the second wave drink. But we make a chocolate syrup with Ghirardelli chocolate powder and abuelita. We got a marshmallow syrup from Pink House, a fresh marshmallow syrup, good espresso, shaken, poured in a cup. It's like, even if specialty people are like, I don't want to drink that drink, it's delicious and it's high quality ingredients and it's specialty coffee within it. We launched a strawberry syrup made from fresh strawberries from Arkansas, cold pressed, just like really high quality, made a strawberry matcha. So we're going to continue to develop that program. And I think that's the way you get people in the door into these places, where they're not going to come in for a pour over. They'll come in for an iced matcha, and then you can slowly bring them into the process. Yeah. And then they're still expanding. I mean, we've got 4 more Capital One cafes opening this year. I think 8 more slotted for next year. So that's a lot of what we're looking forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what about, let's see, Nordstrom, they have cafes, Buc-ee's, the convenience store in Texas. Where else are you going to put this next? Anything fun in the works?
To be honest, I think this project has shown us what specialty coffee can be in an amazing way. It's also shown us the challenges. And Verve, as much as we're innovating and pushing the boundaries, we're also very thoughtful about partnerships and collaborations. Nothing in the works right now as far as how can we push the boundaries even further. I don't think we're going to be in Buc-ee's at any point soon, but I think this Capital One project continues to be kind of our poster child of can we do this and how are we going to do this if we're going to do it well, and not wanting to take on too much at once in that realm. So see us there, go try us out. Send me feedback if you ever go into a cafe, you or anyone watching, send Verve feedback. We'd love to hear it. And again, like kind of our North Star, one of the visions for us is the best coffee in X city is in a bank, which would be is a stretch, but we think could be possible.
Yeah. I've been twice. I've been, I think, in Chicago and then here in Austin, and had pleasant experiences both times. Yeah.
Good to hear. Yeah.
Well, let's rewind time a little bit. So you got stuck in China during COVID. You wanted to work at this farm. First of all, how did you pick China to be the place where you wanted to work on a coffee farm? And what did like January from April look like as COVID was unfolding?
Oh goodness, man. Absolutely wild process, but I was committed to living on a coffee farm for at least a full harvest. Put feelers out, was thinking about going to Peru, had even some opportunities in Burundi with long miles. And then like before I bought my flight to move to Burundi, 3 times in 1 week, people brought me specialty Chinese coffee. And I was just like, what the heck is going on? And like one of the barista competitors was competing with it. Someone else had mentioned it. Maybe another bag I saw in a store. And I was like, I just need to see what's going on here. So I like on Google, specialty coffee China. And there really is like only 1, maybe 2 specialty exporters from China. So the one that I found that their website was in English and I could figure out how to kind of decipher it, found an email and just shot them an email. It was like, hey, wild, shot in the dark, but any chance I could come live on the farm and work for you for free? I just want to learn more. And what also interested me was they were working mainly with Catimor, Robusta hybrid variety that I think a lot of roasters tend to turn their nose up to because it's got, strands of Robusta in it, and it can tend to have a certain flavor profile. But I do think there's certain areas of the world, and I hope climate change stops, but if it continues, we might need to be looking to more innovative varieties. I was like, this could be a part of it. I don't know. I want to get there and work on processing to see if we can take a cup score of 80, 81 up even higher through processing. Anyway, they shot me back and were like, actually, we could use your help given you've cupped a bunch and we'd love for you to cup day lots, like be fully on the farm working, but roast on an Akawa on the farm, cupping day lots, and essentially us figuring out what works for this region of China with these processing methods. So I'd never been to China, didn't know Mandarin. They didn't even speak Mandarin on the farm. It was like a local people group. Spoke Lahu, and took a flight, took another flight, took a bus, took a car, and eventually ended up on this farm. And there actually was one American dude who lived in China who knew Mandarin and worked for this company, and he was kind of my contact, and I couldn't have done it without him. But got to the farm and immediately it's like harvest starts. We were receiving 10 plus tons of cherry a day, working 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. every single day of harvest. That's just what it takes. But then each day, all right, for this round, let's do naturals, let's do honeys, let's do black honeys, white honeys, yellow honeys. We started doing anaerobics and essentially just like cupping throughout the process. And then one day I didn't have self-service, and I had Wi-Fi at one spot on the farm, like in the main little house. And so I'd walk over, check my phone, and a bunch of emails. People are like, do you have the virus? Are you okay? And I was like, what are you talking about virus? I'm fine. Like there's 20 people in this village. Nothing's spreading here. I thought it was like the flu. But then I like look up online and it's just like flooded with stuff. And I essentially was like, do I try to leave? Do I stay? And I had some advice from friends that I knew who had lived in China. They were like, essentially, it's going to be pretty strict. You should probably try to get out. So I got in a car, started driving. This guy was driving me to the nearest airport. And we're in the middle of the mountains in China, like 5 minutes from Myanmar, middle of nowhere, the middle of the road. Halfway through, there's like this massive white tent, big spotlights. This is like 10 p.m. at night. People in hazmat suits, like walking over to the car, and we didn't know what was going on. And they're like, hey, we got I mean, I couldn't understand, but we need to test you. And they like stick something on my nose. And I was like, this is the end. I have no idea what's happening right now. Like, couldn't understand. Long story short, ended up getting out, went to Thailand for a few weeks, worked with some coffee farmers there in Chiang Rai, and it was incredible. But then it seemed like COVID was getting better. So I went back into China a few weeks later. Immediately, they locked the borders. I got put in quarantine, and I got stuck for almost a year there. Ended up being an incredible experience, just finishing up harvest, cupping all the lots, learning a lot. And then there's a place called Torch Coffee in Puar. They are SCA, SCI, training facility, roaster, wholesale, all of it. An American dude was running it. And so I moved to Puar because there was nothing to do on the farm. And he's like, I can't pay you, but you can work for me and then essentially trade for your queue at the end of it. So ended up just moving to Puar, got rent, bought a scooter. I was like, I don't know how long I'll be here. May as well start living life here. Started learning Mandarin, and spent the next 4 or 5 months working for that roaster in China and waiting until the borders opened.
Yeah. Wait until the borders open. Wow. That's quite a phrase.
Yeah.
Well, we have almost no Chinese specialty coffee here in the U.S. And exposure to this is so low and might stay low for a long time with the tariff situation. Who knows?
Absolutely.
I don't know how that affects it. But what should people in the United States know about Chinese coffee?
Good question. Gosh, my answer would have been different 6 months ago, just in the sense of like accessibility and tariffs and all of that. But I would say we can talk about China specifically, but I would kind of throw in some other countries into this group of less exposed origins where people have a certain idea or maybe don't have an idea of how the coffee can taste there, knowing there can be good coffee and there are amazing coffee farmers in those regions producing coffee. Throw in Nepal or India or Laos, China. I mean, a lot of these are, I would say, within Asia. I've definitely got a heart for coffee within Asia. But if I wanted people to know one thing, it's like, give it a chance. Also, it's an amazing opportunity to see how processing can affect cup score, because I know Black and White they worked with the the exporter I was working with and did this wild process. Like I think they called it Black Sheep Double Anaerobic through Torch Coffee. And that one was maybe even on a fellow drop. And I know, tons of people now have access or have tasted Chinese coffee because of that. There's some pretty solid wash coffees, but just opening your eyes to the origins of the world that can produce coffee.
Harris, this has been such an interesting conversation. I really appreciate you opening the hood, showing us how this is working for y'all with Capital One Cafe. And I think you're an inspiration to those of us who want to see coffee exist in more spaces and make sense, from a business perspective. So thanks for sharing so much with us.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for hearing me out and helping me open folks' eyes to hopefully what this can be. It's definitely not without its challenges, but even in all the challenges and how tired we are after 2 years of getting these things going, I would 1,000% say it's worth it, especially given the impact that it can make on the farm level, and then also hopefully to specialty as a whole.
Aside from visiting a Capital One Cafe that's local, where can people follow the journey or follow you?
Yeah, I guess Instagram, Harris Nash is my handle, but Verve Cafes, we're pushing the boundaries in our cafes in an amazing way. If you're in California, Santa Cruz, San Francisco, LA, Palo Alto, we just launched a full matcha menu, and not like the just trendy iced matcha. It's like we have our coffee menu, then we have a matcha menu, and it's a single origin matcha, and then more of a blend of a matcha that people can have with milk. There's a matcha cortado, matcha Gibraltar. There's a matcha tonic, essentially showing matcha should be and can be as appreciated as coffee. And so need to plug that. It's been a fun journey in the last 6 months here.
Wow, bold choice, man. Wish we had more time to talk about that.
Yeah, all good. So, hey, thanks for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Harris. Have a good one.